Good morning, everyone. Welcome to ArtsBeat TV and radio here on Westfield Community Programming Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. We've got a great program lined up for you today. Our first guest is Fred Sokol. Many of you have read his theater reviews over the years in the Springfield Republican newspapers, and he moved on to writing online for Talking Broadway. He's written plays, he's written screenplays, taught theater, directed theater, and he has a new novel out at the end of the month called Destiny. Good morning, Fred.
Morning, Mark.
So, what made you decide to write a novel? You've written plays and some other things. Is this the first novel, or is this a second or third?
This is actually a sequel to Mendel and Morris, which was self-published in 2011, a book that was in the works for literally decades. And it's about these two elderly Jewish guys who are shuffleboard players. The first book is. And, you know, much to my great surprise and delight, a lot of people like the first book. So I wrote a second book, and this is a sequel, and this is called Destiny. It's far more complicated, same guys, but a lot more characterization of other people, including some interesting women. It's kind of a road trip, coming of older age road trip buddy story. These guys go across the state and end up at Cranes Beach. A lot more happens there.
When did you start writing it? Was there a break in between the first book and the second?
I think what happened was that I wanted to write it. I started writing it, and then again, I began writing a play, which was called Forever Boys, again featuring Mendel and Morris in a different locale. And I was simultaneously writing these two things, my first play and my second novel. It's kind of like parallel tracks, fiction and playwriting.
Well, I remember the play because I believe it had a staged reading or a workshop reading, depending on what you want to call it, at Berkshire Theater Group. And you had told me about it at one point and were quite excited. That, I guess, was in its final product before the novel. But how far along was the novel when the play came out?
Well, the novel was what I thought in pretty decent shape. And then I discovered more recently, and recently in this context is the last year or so, that it needed a lot more detail work. Fortunately, my publisher, Linda Cardillo of Bella Storia Press, found an editor who did some very, very careful work on it and asked me literally thousands of questions. Some were very small, like should a period be here? And some were more contextual, and I had to respond to every single one with an accept or a reject and fix them all. And really, so it started writing itself, I would say, maybe 5, 6 years ago, and then I began, in a sense, reworking much of it, although not the primary storylines, more recently, during the past year.
So I know that Bella Storia Press is located here in Western Massachusetts, and I know Linda Cardillo because she's written so many novels and stuff like that. Was she, this press, they provided you with an editor to go through it. How long was the editing process, and how many times did you have to go back to the original manuscript and make changes?
Well, what happened, Mark, was it took some time to find somebody who is really good at this and would be adept at dealing with this kind of a novel. So I would say maybe 4 or 5 months ago, Linda said to me, the editor's finished. Look at your screen on your iMac, and you're going to find a lot of things brought to your attention. And so literally, there are all kinds of dots all over my screen, and each one of those dots indicated that I had to make a response. And that was, you know, a really formative, and it seemed like an awesome project in the sense of huge. but it was all to the good because it's a much better product now. It's a richer book, and it's very hard for all of us to revise, and I tried to pretend that I could get away with not doing this, but it turns out that this was beneficial in every single way to my final product, and I'm actually proud of that product, which is a lot better than the book I started writing 5-6 years ago.
It's funny, when you were saying that the editor helped shape it. When you write theater today, and you're one of the major theater writers in our area, although you write nationally, do you have an editor, or do you just submit your material?
I do have an editor, and many times that editor takes what I have and simply posts it. Many other times she has questions, and I need to do some revision. I do write for one editor, and I like her a great deal because I think she respects me and what I do, and I think that her commentary is usually constructive in the best sense of that word, i.e., I don't understand where you're going with this, or you said this earlier, things like that. So I do write for an editor at Talkin' Broadway, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I've written, when I write for Westfield News, I have an editor. When I do radio, I don't. When I write in business publications, occasionally I do. And with some of the other things, I find that the editing process is almost as exciting and as challenging as the writing process, because I can sit down and bang out a review in a matter of 20 minutes to a half an hour. But going through the editing process and fixing the typos and juxtaposing words and everything, that to me becomes the big challenge.
Totally agree. And I should say on this note, since we're talking about theater a little bit, that in a curious way, the fact that I'm not driving and running all over the Berkshires and deep into Connecticut this summer has freed me artistically to work on my own projects. One was the final segment involved with Destiny, and also other work, another novel which I have in pretty good shape, and one behind that. And so that while I love, and you do too, I love theater so much and miss it dearly, I think in a kind of a psychic way, it's given me more energy to devote to my own work.
I understand that because, as you said, I have not covered a show since the end of February, and I so miss live theater. I really wanted to go last summer to Berkshire Theater Group and to Barrington Stage to see their live performances, and then part of me said, no, I don't want to sit in a tent with other people, and I kind of held back. But it's given me an opportunity, and it's freed up some time to do some other kind of writing. I'm involved in a medical podcast series, which I would never have had the opportunity to be involved with had my theater schedule been full. And I'm also working on my own book about my accident a couple of years ago and my recovery and how it changed work focus, plus writing nonfiction. And I never had the time to think through a lot of the things that I wrote. I just sat down and wrote them. And having that time to reflect and really outline things is a different experience for me.
I concur. And you know that I've retired a few times, and I think this is permanent, but I do miss creating and producing and directing all the college theater I worked on over so many years. I miss that person who was in the center of things. On the other hand, that pressure is no longer there. And so I try to transfer that to my own work. And I feel pretty good about it. Finally, I feel pretty good about it. I mean, I was very much underconfident in terms of my ability to write novels until people actually started to like them and compliment me about them. And then I started saying, well, maybe I can really do this. I mean, a few to several people in my life have said, look, you're really an excellent dialogue writer. You should be doing this, whether it's within the context of a novel or playwriting. You should do more of that. Go ahead and do it. And, I kind of tried to get out of that, but now I really revel in it. It's great. Great stuff.
Let me ask you a question. Your son, or one of your sons, is a published writer in the nonfiction genre. Did you show him your work as it was progressing, or did you show any friends before it got to the publisher?
I did not show it to Jason, who's a civil rights historian and writes the kinds of books I could never write. He's a more deliberate person. He's a better researcher, and it's just a totally different form and genre. So, no, I did not show this to him. He really enjoyed the first book. He laughed a lot, he said. I mean, the first book and these older Jewish folks are not my father, but they're, in a sense, drawn from who my father was. And this book is filled with Yiddishisms. In fact, there's a glossary to help people out. And people say to me, you know, they kind of question me. They go, you're not a member of a synagogue. And I'm not. I'm a cultural Jew who grew up with some Yiddish being spoken in his household as a boy. I mean, we were English-speaking family, but I heard a lot of Yiddish phrases. And I retained them, and they've come out in my work as a fiction writer. So I'm reluctant to show my work to a lot of people. I usually show the novels to one or two people beforehand. I'm not a member of writers' groups, as some of my fellow writers are. I simply write a little bit or revise a little bit each day. And if I feel that I'm productive in that way, I feel good about things. I feel like I'm moving forward. As I said, I have various projects on different burners these days, and so I tend to different things.
We're going to take a quick break, Fred, and to acknowledge the underwriters that make ArtsBeat possible here, and we'll be back. We're chatting with Fred Sokol, the theater reporter, who's got a new novel, Destiny, coming out on Bella Storia Press at the end of September. You're listening to ArtsBeat or watching ArtsBeat on Westfield's Community Programming Channel 15 or 89.5 FM WSKB. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. I'm Mark Auerbach, and we'll return after we acknowledge our underwriters, so don't go away.
Is provided by Westfield Bank. For more than 160 years, Westfield Bank has been an important community presence and commercial leader in the Pioneer Valley, with convenient full banking services in Westfield, West Springfield, East Longmeadow, Agawam, Feeding Hills, Springfield, Southwick, as well as Enfield and Granby, Connecticut. Visit us on the web at westfieldbank.org.
Support for community radio on WSKB is provided by Betts Plumbing and Heating Supply Company, an independent, family-owned wholesaler serving Westfield for over 50 years, specializing in plumbing, heating, and industrial piping supplies. On the web at bettsplumbing.com or at 14 Coleman Avenue in Westfield.
This is Ken Stomsky from Ken's Den on WCPC 15 and 89.5 FM, Tuesdays, 8 to 10.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB. Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to ArtsBeat, everyone. I'm Mark Auerbach. We're chatting with Fred Sokol, the theater writer who has got a new novel coming out. It's called Destiny. It's on Bella Storia Press, a local Western Massachusetts publishing company, and the book comes out the end of September. Fred, with the pandemic, it's going to be kind of tough to do readings and book signings and stuff like that to promote the book. Do you plan to do anything virtually to any readings and stuff like that?
I do, Mark, and I also want to say that the book is actually out right now, so that people do know that. It was actually the end of August that it was available for publication. It's published now at this moment. And the answer to your question is yes, that the Longmeadow Library, the Storrs Library in Longmeadow, the Enfield Public Library, and there's going to be an article about me and the book at some point in the Springfield Republican. And I believe that the Senior Center in Longmeadow also wants me to do some kind of virtual or Zoom presentation. So I do have a number of things coming up. I'm excited about that. We're looking into a bookstore, but again, during this very strange time of ours, we cannot do person-to-person work. I wish we could, I mean, that's the way I always taught, and find it very difficult to even imagine teaching these days. I have both my son and daughter-in-law teach at University of New Hampshire, and are doing that via some kind of virtual arrangement. It kind of takes a lot out. But back to the topic at hand, the answer to your question is yes, and I'm happily so. Yes.
So let me ask you another question. When did you start doing theater?
Well, when did I start writing about theater or doing the plays?
When did you start writing about theater? Because as I recall, you came to the Springfield newspapers, and I can't remember if the Republican and the Daily News were one at that point, but you wrote for them for a long time, and you replaced a guy known as the Artful Codger, Richard Hammerich,
right,
who had been a theater writer for generations. And I believe he's still alive and living in northern Connecticut. But
wow,
he went to high school with my dad. And so that would put him at least at 101, if not
wow,
a little bit older. And when I came to Springfield, and my first PR job was at the Springfield Symphony, followed by Stage West. He sort of took me under his wing a little bit. I had never written any kind of theater criticism, but I remember him coming to the box office to get his press tickets, and the only two things he worried about at every performance was how many people were there and how many intermissions and how long was the show. So when you came along and replaced him, I figured that was a Springfield newspaper's requirement. So I had all those numbers prepared, and you never asked me.
Well, this is a great story. I'll try to make it concise. But when we were at Asnuntuck, and I was at Asnuntuck for a long time, we created a literary journal called the Connecticut Quarterly, and I was the kind of founding editor. And on our board was a guy named F.D. Reeve, who was a poet and a scholar of Russian literature. He also happened to be the father of Christopher Reeve. And I kind of came to know Frank Reeve pretty well. And I said to him, look, can I get an interview with your son? And it was during the Superman craze. So I went to New York, and during intermission of the 5th of July, he was starring that with Jeff Daniels and Susie Kurtz. He gave me this interview. And it was kind of a coup to get that. So I took the interview, and I walked into the Springfield newspaper office one day, and I said, look, I've got this interview of Chris Reeve. Do you want it? And they said, yeah, obviously we want it. And by the way, can you review plays? And I had not done that up until this point, and this was around 1980 or so. And I said, sure, I can do it. And then they sent me to Amherst College to review As You Like It. And everything happened from there. So, happy coincidence, serendipitous, huh?
It is. I mean, it's all serendipity. When I was leaving Stage West to start my own PR company, the publisher of the Jewish Weekly News came to me and said, would you like to be our arts and features editor? And it's something I had never done. My background was in radio. And for several years, I not only reviewed theater in print for them, but I did feature stories, I did travel stories, I did food stories. And they also had a column called Town Chatter, which was sort of their gossip column. And it gave me an opportunity when I wrote for that on occasion to get all of my friends' names in the Jewish Weekly News, as though it was like a stepping stone to Hollywood or something. Yeah. But I fell into it as well. And, have been doing it now for probably 30 or more years.
Yeah.
But radio was where I came from. And in those days, I mean, I talk about the old days or whatever, you did have radio stations covering plays, and all of the newspapers had theater writers. And now you and I and Chris Roman, who writes for Stage Struck at the Valley Advocate, and Jeff Borak at the Berkshire Eagle, and one or two others, are a handful of arts and theater reporters, specifically when there used to be dozens and dozens.
Yeah.
So we sort of survived.
Right.
And so I guess after this novel, you're going to write about old Jewish guys. You're going to write about you and me sitting around somewhere and just
Well,
schmoozing.
well, let me use this as a segue. I think for the moment, I've written 2 novels and 2 plays featuring Mendel and Morris, and for the moment, I think I'm putting them aside. Although somebody challenged me to do some more, but I kind of alluded to this when we began talking a while ago. But I've written another novel, and this one is set in 1965, and it's told through the voice of an 18-year-old woman. So it's completely different. It's going to be called Summer of '65, and I know that Linda Cardillo is at least interested in this. So that one is in pretty good shape. And so I'm moving on to different people and different voices. But, I mean, I love my guys. I love Mendel and Morris. And, these 2 books, and particularly Destiny, I think it's a story of aging and friendship, and it's funny. And I think, it's camaraderie, that kind of a thing, gentle, and in some ways more complex. There's some religion in this book as well, but follow-up books are going to be something else, I think.
How much time a day do you spend writing? I mean, I know that you retired from teaching, but you're still covering shows.
Yeah.
Do you sit down and write every day, like it's, let's say, from 10 to 2, or do you write when the mood strikes? I'm just really curious. How do you do it?
I write every day, and I hope to get something done. I'm not the kind of person who writes during a specific bracketed hour, and I'm not the kind of person who demands that he write 10 pages a day. But I do want of myself to do something so that when we're finished, for example, I'm even on to something else, and I need to be in the revision process of that. I need to be doing something. And if I do something relative to my work, whether it's creating new words and new dialogue and new narrative, that's fine. Or if I'm going back over something I've done, that's fine as well. When I don't get anything done in a day relative to my writing, I'm dissatisfied, it seems.
Do you write on longhand like you see in the movies on the yellow pads that are lined, or do you write on your computer?
I actually write on my iPad, and I find that a more friendly device to use than my iMac. And who knows why that is? Maybe because it travels with me. I'm used to it. It's nice to me. I don't know what it is, but my iPad is my vehicle these days.
Well, Fred Sokol, I hope that folks run out and buy your book. Have you developed a website for it at this point, or should people go to Bella Storia Press?
Well, and then people can go to fredsokol.com. I actually have a website, which is amazing to me that I follow through with it, but fredsokol.com will give you news of me, what's upcoming, my book of Destiny, Bella Storia, or if we're allowed to say this, I know that it's listed on both Amazon and Barnes & Noble websites at this point. And very much appreciate being on your program, Mark. This has been great.
Fred, it's always good to chat with you, and I hope we get to do this again down the road. We've been chatting with Fred Sokol, theater writer for TalkingBroadway.com, when, of course, theaters reopen, and the author of the new book, Destiny. When we come back after a break to acknowledge underwriters, we're going to be chatting with Jonathan Mirin from the PT Theater Company, which has been around a while, but PT Theater, in association with some other organizations, has started a thing called the Valley Arts Mentors Program, which is really essential to help emerging artists in various disciplines get mentored by people who can help them move their careers forward. So it's going to be an interesting chat coming up next. And you can catch ArtsBeat every Friday at 8 o'clock here on both Westfield Community Programming Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB. And coming mid-October on Wednesdays, I'll have a new series starting called On the Mark. And I'll be interviewing and chatting with people in all disciplines, arts and non-arts, here on both media, on TV and radio. Peter Coles is our chief engineer today. We're broadcasting from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, and we'll be right back.
Support for community radio on WSKB provided by Westfield Electroplating. Employing over 140 skilled platers, painters, and technicians, Westfield Electroplating was founded in 1946 and was the first company in the country to achieve National Aerospace and Defense Contractor Program accreditation, proudly maintaining that status for over a decade. Westfield Electroplating provides over 50 quality finishes to meet your corrosion, cosmetic, or performance needs. On the web at www.westfieldplating.com or 413-568-3716. Westfield Electroplating, putting the finishing touches on technology.
Underwriting for WSKB's community radio programming is brought to you in part by R. Levesque Associates. They are offering landscape architecture, civil engineering, environmental permitting, and land surveying. RLA is a second-generation company devoted to excellence in the planning and design of outdoor spaces. On the web at rlaland.com or at 40 School Street in Westfield.
Join us the third Wednesday of every month with Selectman Joe Didi and his take on everything Southwick.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB. Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to ArtsBeat, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. We're broadcasting today from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy. And on our second half of our program today, we're going to meet Jonathan Mirin, who's from the PT Theater Company here in Western Massachusetts. But he and some other people have started a program called the Valley Arts Mentors, which I think is providing an essential service for a lot of the people in the creative economy here in our listening area. Welcome, John.
Hey, Mark. Thanks for having me on.
Well, it's great to have you. I got this press release from you earlier in the summer talking about Valley Arts Mentors. So describe how it came together.
Well, it really came out of a meeting that the Community Foundation of Western Mass held, I believe it was January of 2019, where they brought a whole bunch of artists around the valley together to think more broadly about how the arts could be lifted up, valley-wide. And there were various brainstorming sessions as part of that day, and that was sort of the seed of this particular project, Valley Arts Mentors, which is really intended to be, initially was, envisioned as kind of a networking, a way to bring, to connect arts education organizations across the valley who, typically you would have, each organization is just like struggling to survive day to day and is busy meeting deadlines, et cetera, but there's actually like a huge value to networking between organizations and sharing resources, and we thought that Valley Arts Mentors could be a way of doing that.
So how does it work? Well, first of all, let's backtrack. It's not only the PT Theater, but there are two other groups that are involved in this. And,
right. Yep.
Who are they?
Yeah, so the main partners are Holyoke Media and Big Brothers Big Sisters of Franklin County. So that's the Jennifer Webster, who's the executive director of Big Brothers Big Sisters of Franklin County, and Scott McPherson from Holyoke Media has been sort of the primary brainstorm partners around sort of the whole development of this project.
So how does it work? I understand it's geared towards emerging artists, those that are just starting out in their careers, and it, as I understand it, pairs them with somebody who's more experienced and been around the block a few times, so to speak. So is it a formal mentoring process? Is it informal? And how do the mentors get matched up with the mentees?
Yeah, it's a good question. So this is sort of the first actual programming that Valley Arts Mentors is offering, and it's essentially a 6-month mentorship program, which, because of COVID is going to be remote. So basically mentors and mentees will connect every 2 weeks for a 6-month period, and the idea is to match disciplines, mentors who have 15 plus years of experience in their discipline, with either people doing considering a career change, or younger artists starting out, and the kind of the theory behind it is, which is sort of Big Brothers Big Sisters has been helping us with some of the background for this, but that having a relationship with someone who's really made a life in the arts like this can be a huge factor in sort of giving someone the confidence to pursue what they really want to pursue.
How did you get to the Pitti Theater? What's your background? And did you have a mentor or mentors along the way?
That's a good question. Well, Pitti Theater really came out of, well, it's a long story, but we've got started formally in 2004, and kind of came out of, initially I was an actor in New York, and then started writing plays, and then got a master's from BU in playwriting, and then just realized that what I really wanted to do was create and tour new work that we were creating. And along the way there, I got married with a choreographer, designer. So we sort of basically just started working together because we were living together, and that's how PT got started. But way back, I'd been doing theater like many people with the theater problem. Had gotten started back in like elementary school, and just happened to have, for example, I had an incredible high school drama teacher named Mark Lindbergh, and people like that along the way. I also had a great teacher named Richard Pinter in at the Neighborhood Playhouse, which is a conservatory in New York. Just who were just extremely inspiring folks who had made a life in theater, and kind of provided a sort of roadmap.
Yeah, how did the roadmap bring you to Western Massachusetts?
That's another good question, Mark. My wife is Swiss. She's her name's Godelieve Richard, and we, when we first met, we actually met at a meditation center in Switzerland, and then did some traveling in Asia after that, and then came back, and I was sort of doing this BU Masters in Playwriting program, and it turned out that the particular kind of meditation that we were both practicing happened to have there was a meditation center up in Shelburne that needed some administrative help back in like 2005 or 6, and it's called the Vipassana Meditation Center in Shelburne. And so we moved out here to try living in Western Mass, and to help out at the center for a year, and just ended up falling in love with the area, and I've been here ever since.
So you're part of the creative economy, the group of artists that chose Western Massachusetts to live and work.
I guess we did. We did actually make that choice. Yeah.
And the theater company is located in Western Mass as well, correct?
Yeah. No, we're based in. It's one of those things up in the hill towns. We're technically residents of Charlemont, but our address is Shelburne Falls.
So you get to walk over that bridge of flowers every once in a while and meditate on the great scenery up there.
I should do that more often, but I do I'm always shocked to see all the tourists up here walking across the bridge, and then sometimes I actually get a chance to remember why they're doing that.
Or the movies that get filmed up there. It seems that Shelburne Falls is just a magnet for films.
It is. We had, Labor Day, and there was a couple right in a row there.
The
Labor
Judge,
Day and
I think, was one of them. I don't know why that title sticks in my head, but I, did some work with the Berkshire Film and Media Collaborative, and twice there have been major films filmed up there in recent years, and it's very good for the entire economy of Shelburne Falls.
Yeah, no, it was great, and I guess there hasn't been anything in a few years, but that was a huge boost, and I know the Greater Shelburne Falls Area Business Association had a big role in sort of facilitating all that when that was happening.
So, in terms of your own work with the Valley Arts Mentors and PT Theater, how have you managed during the pandemic? Where did you end up sheltering in place? And has the mentoring program can certainly work, I suppose, through Zoom or through a phone conversation or something like that. But what about the theater?
Yeah, it's a good question. We actually had our first socially distanced performance in July up in Keene, New Hampshire. It was we have this performance called "To Be or Not to Be" with two E's about pollinator disappearance, and it's the most uplifting show about pollinator disappearance you'll see probably.
It may be the only show hit up on that subject.
Yeah, maybe. There's some good documentaries, but yeah. And we're doing another socially distanced performance, outdoor performance of that show with a group called the Kestrel Land Trust coming up September 20th down, I believe that's going to be in West Hampton. But so we are doing some of that. But the main thing we've been doing actually is we switched over to this. I've sort of fallen for podcasts, which I guess you probably know more about than I do. We had a teen program going. We run a teen program called Valley Playwright Mentoring as opposed to Valley Arts Mentors. It's another kind of mentoring program. It's our own. It's PT Theater's own program, and it's basically we have teens who create scenes and plays inspired by stories from their lives over a 6-month period. And, we were maybe 4 weeks away from a show, from the sort of culminating performance of that. And so when COVID came and we switched over to a podcast format and essentially turned all the teens were sheltering in place. We found this audio platform called CleanFeed through our sound designer, and basically we had the teens just calling into CleanFeed, or logging into CleanFeed, and we're able to actually record pretty good dramatic material with teens in their own houses. So that's one thing.
Was this for the teens writing and producing theater for other teens, or were they writing and producing for a larger audience?
It was more for a general audience, not specifically for teens, but we're trying to share those radio plays now with high schools and social service organizations who might be able to, because the teens are just basically addressing stuff that's going on in their lives. So there are scenes about the opioid crisis, mental health, cyberbullying, all kinds of stuff that schools and social service organizations are dealing with. So we're hoping that those plays can be a conversation starter. And what's kind of nice about the podcast form is that they're just living on our website, as opposed to if we had done the live performance.
Right, they're there, and people seem to discover them through various platforms. I mean, I'm working on a podcast for one of my clients, which is a medical history podcast, and it's found its way into niches that it's sort of like the podcast world is like a huge library. You can walk in and find whatever you want, and it's there, and you can take it out, and you don't have to return it on a specific date. It can live on your laptop.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's interesting. You're doing a medical history one because our current project, our sort of main September project, is related to with this museum in Connecticut called the Aldrich Museum of Contemporary Art, and it's essentially researching Ridgefield, Connecticut, and taking some stories from the local history there, and creating, I guess you'd call it, history-based radio plays.
I think that it's interesting that you're working with teens and giving them the opportunity to speak out. I did a series here for Westfield Community Programming and for 89.5 FM. It was kind of an offshoot of ArtsBeat because in the spring there were no shows to review and nothing to cover.
Right.
And so I put together with Peter Coles, my producer, we thought, well, why don't we do a show called How We're Doing and see how people are coping? I knew people who worked at home regularly and could offer other people advice on how to work from home, whether you Zoomed it, whether you phoned it in and stuff like that. And I did interview an EMT who was a college student, and the series ended up being 10 hours. And the big comment that I got back from the college student participating is nobody asks people our age to what our opinions are. And so as I've continued on with some of the work I'm doing, and I'm launching a new series in October, I'm thinking about these younger voices and what they have to say, because they're often ignored, and not on purpose, but the people go to the pundits and the critics and the experts, and they don't think that an 18-year-old or a 20-year-old has a valid opinion, but in reality they see the world in ways that we don't.
Right, or even a 15 or even a 13-year-old. It's surprising, really, what the kind of truth and the honesty and the risks, that teens can take when they're sort of supported properly in an artistic context.
Will you be mentoring teens as part of the Valley Arts Mentors?
That's a good question. I know Scott at Holyoke Media and Natalia Munoz, who works with him, are going to take on a mentee. I'm debating to see how things fall out, because we already, in addition to me, there's like Sabrina Hamilton from the Co-Festival is one of the mentors. So I don't know if I'm going to be needed. If I might be just more in a facilitating role, but we'll see. I'd love to do it.
Yeah, I think that, when I think back about how I got to where I am and the people in my life, you mentioned your drama teacher. I had an English teacher who forced me to read plays. I had never had the chance before. I never had opened a play to read it. And it opened my eyes to a lot of things. And then down the road, as I went into a career in arts marketing, people that taught me how to write grants and that had been in the business or taught me how to design and stuff. And if without these mentors, I wouldn't be where I am today. And I don't know, like you, I take it an extra step, and I have college-age students that I mentor that work for my company as interns and or paid people. And I think that mentoring is so important in order to develop the next generation of people.
Yeah, actually, when you're talking, it makes me think of, we just had two great college interns helping out PT remotely over the summer, and it was we actually found them both through the UMass Arts Extension Service internship fair, which I think is coming up again remotely in a week or two. But that was fun in the sense that some of the other staff people at PT were also kind of mentoring but also it was a great one of those win-win things where the mentees are or I say in this case interns. So it wasn't we didn't call it a formal mentoring relationship, but that's essentially what it kind of turns into, and where they're really adding a lot to the organization, and also hopefully getting something out of it.
When you think of an intern or a mentee, the minute the word comes up, I think doctors. You go to the hospital and there's the intern working. But in our world of the performing arts and the visual arts, mentoring has always been an informal process, and in terms of how we go from that first audition to the performance and to something or the first draft of a play or the first lighting plot or something like that. And it's always been that the younger generation that comes in is tutored and mentored along by the older generation. And I'm just wondering if that's a part, I know it's a part of dance, I know it's a part of music and theater. Maybe it's part of visual arts and photography and graphic design as well, but it's sort of one of the best resources any of us in the arts can have to move ahead.
Yeah, I agree, and I think what's interesting about it is that historically, I think lots of artists received informal. There was no mentorship program per se. They just fell into it, like it sounds like you did a number of times. Just in the course of finding your way as an artist. But I think that it can also function formally the way Big Brothers Big Sisters obviously functions formally across the country with great success, and that by offering this kind of formal, especially in a rural place where people are spread out, there tends to be it can be more isolating. That we're hoping that this particular mentorship program really can fill a need for some people.
So if people want to get involved at Valley Arts Mentors, either to be mentored or to offer their services as a mentor, where can they learn more about this?
Yeah, so artsmentors.org is the website, just all one word, artsmentors.org. And then, you just click on mentorship program right at the top, and there's a small little survey for the mentees and the mentors. There's also a link, to get in touch with us. So that's where you would learn more, and that's how to get in touch with us. And of course, people can also just call 508-439-2069 or email John, Jon, at artsmentors.org.
How is this project going to be funded? Do people pay to be mentored, or are there foundations, corporations, and individuals participating?
Yeah. So this Valley Arts Mentors has been funded through the Community Foundation of Western Massachusetts Valley Creates program, which is a relatively new, I guess it now must be 3-year-old initiative of the Community Foundation to really bolster the arts in the Valley, and they receive funding in addition through the Barr Foundation. So that's really how it's funded, and we actually offer a stipend to both mentors and mentees. In other words, for people who complete the program and need a little bit of financial support, because they're taking time away from jobs and family and all that. We actually offer a stipend for those who complete.
Now, how long can somebody be mentored? Is there a time limit to it?
Well, the way we're setting up it, we're setting it up as a 6-month program, and but of course there's no, if it turns into a great relationship, I would certainly hope that mentors and mentees stay in touch after that. But that's how it's structured.
And how do you think you'll evaluate a mentor-mentee relationship? If somebody publishes their play, obviously the mentorship worked. But if you're developing young artists, how does it get evaluated, or what will you look for to see that it's a success?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're basically we're not sort of just saying to mentors and mentees, here's your match and good luck. We sort of are going to offer structured support the whole way, and as part of that support, sort of be doing temperature checks, quote unquote, of how it's going and what they need to be more successful. And, at the end, there'll be actual, evaluations of how we did, and not of how each other did, but just sort of the whole process, so that we can kind of keep improving it. But that's a great question. It's sort of how do you evaluate?
Okay, so artsmentors.org for that. And for PT Theater, if people want to learn more about what you're doing, how can they find out about that?
Our website is P like Peter, T like Tom, co.org. So ptco.org is PT Theater's website.
And does PT Theater do work all year round, or is it a seasonal situation?
No, we do work all year round. We're actually a touring company, or now in this case, a podcasting company. But we don't have our own performance space. A couple times a year we rent space up in Franklin County and host festivals, or family audiences festivals. One's called the Great Greenfield Dino Fest, which I think is going to be reinvented virtually this year. And the other is called Syrup, One Sweet Performing Arts Festival, which is a sort of celebration of sap and spring in March. which we had to cancel this year, but we're hoping will work in one way or another for March 2021. So,
do you think? Do you think optimistically you'll be able to do any live work in the beginning of 2021, or do you think it's going to, from your own perspective, it'll be a longer period of time?
Yeah, I it's going to be interesting. We're trying to take advantage of the good weather now. Like we're going to we have a youth program that came to an end with COVID kind of abruptly last March, but we're hoping to take advantage of the warm weather and doing some outdoor, like I mentioned, this performance of To Be or Not To Be on September 20th, an outdoor socially distanced performance, and we're actually, there are schools, like we actually have a residency. We do we take requests from teachers about curriculum topics that they want to create a performance with their students about, and so we have actually a residency coming up with Munger Hill Elementary down in Westfield that we're planning to do in a kind of socially distanced.
Well, you have to let me know more about that, because I would love to get you on ArtsBeat again at some point down the road.
Oh, it would be great to be back on. Thank you so much for having me, Mark.
Thanks for joining us, John. That little segment just sped by, and I have a million other questions, so you'll definitely have to come back.
Anytime.
We've been chatting with Jonathan Mirin, who is from the PT Theater Company, who's one of the co-founders of Valley Arts Mentors, which is providing a service for young emerging artists throughout Western Massachusetts. We're going to leave you today with a little bit of George Gershwin from the musical Crazy for You. It's the song Naughty Baby. It's sung by Michelle Pock. And one of the things I discovered during the pandemic was that if I went online and I Googled Crazy for You, the Gershwin musical, which was a big hit on Broadway in the early 1990s with a lot of great dance, you'll find the Paper Mill theater production as filmed by great performances. So if you need a little Gershwin break, there's 2 hours of stuff there. Peter Coles has been our chief engineer. We're broadcasting from Studio 120. We'll see you next Friday at 8 o'clock. And for ArtsBeat, I'm Mark Auerbach. Have a great weekend.
You are, without a doubt, the rudest, most uncouth, roughest man I have ever met. Come here.
Oh.
If you want a girl who's sentimental, one who'll never set you in a whirl, one who will be always sweet and gentle, I am not that kind of girl. But if you prefer a rather swift one, if you think you'd like to run around with a bright one, I am just the right one. Naughty baby, who will tease you? I can show the way and know the way to please you. If you're wanting a beginner, I shan't do. I can make a saint a sinner when I want to. If you find the simple kind are rather slow, dear, then you ought to try a naughty one, you know, dear. But you'll never meet another who will be a naughty baby, just like me. At Bryn Mawr, I was top of my class. All the boys boys were underneath.
Don't go for low. We've been warned about you. You must know that we want you so.
If you find the simple kind are rather slow, dear, then you ought to try a naughty one, you know, dear. But you'll never meet another who will